Rush St. Pierre! Now, introducing his opponent, fighting out of the red corner, a combat combo fighter, holding a professional record, 26 wins, 1 loss.
What's up, you guys? Teddy Striker here, and last Saturday at UFC 330, Islam Makhachev, in my opinion, became the greatest fighter of all time by beating Yair Machado, but the greatest fighter in his weight class is also considered a GOAT, and that is George St. Pierre. And imagine if Islam Makhachev and George St. Pierre fought each other in their primes, who would come out on top? I feel like that's a very interesting matchup, and it would actually be quite competitive. They're both extremely skilled, extremely well-rounded. Even though GSP is a fighter from a different era, I feel like he could still compete against a guy like Islam Makhachev, which just goes to show how good and how great he is. And in addition to this great matchup, I actually have a few more dream matchups that I would like to share with you guys today. So here are my top 10 dream UFC fights that some of them are definitely never going to happen, but some of them actually could happen today. So with all that talk out of the way, let's get right into my top 10 dream fights. And we're going to start with number 10, and that is Yair versus Zabit. Would have been one of the most exciting striking matchups because of how creative and dynamic both guys were. I mean, you saw that elbow from Yair. Like, this guy could pull things out like that and hit you from places you wouldn't even think you'd be able to get hit. And Zabit was also really creative and dynamic, but his style, they require a lot of energy that would slow him down as the fight would go on, which is why I have this at number 10, because I feel like if this was a 5-round fight, at a certain point, Yair would start to take over and start to dominate Zabit. I don't think it would be competitive like for all 5 rounds. But regardless, I feel like this would have been one of the most exciting fights ever. But obviously it got canceled, and it's unfortunate, and we'll never see it. But yeah, I do think that their styles will clash to make a beautiful matchup. But moving on to number 9, and that is I feel like Pereira versus Dillashaw is a more exciting fight, and it will be more competitive as well. Both guys can go the distance. Both guys have championship experience. And also, one thing about Dillashaw in his prime is that he moved a little bit similar to how Sandhagen moved, like when he was fighting Pereira with the switch hitting combinations. But I feel like Dillashaw in his prime was faster, and he was a little bit more tricky than a guy like Sandhagen, and I feel like he could have given Pereira more problems because he would have mixed in his wrestling. I feel like his kicking game was also better than Sandhagen's, and I feel like Pereira would have eventually won that fight, but it would have been very interesting to see how their styles clash. But ultimately, I feel like Pereira has a higher fight IQ. I feel like he's got a power advantage, and we did see Dillashaw, like, he was a little bit chinny too. Like, he was getting dropped quite often. But yeah, I would give an edge to Pereira. But regardless, I do feel like this would have been one of the greatest fights in bantamweight history and just UFC history, period. But I do feel like the next fights are a little bit more interesting for me personally. I feel like Alex Pereira versus Anderson Silva would end in a knockout. And I feel like if it was a middleweight, Anderson Silva could have potentially knocked Alex Pereira out. But I do feel like Pereira could have also put Anderson Silva to sleep. But at light heavyweight, I feel like it leans more in favor of Alex Pereira. He is a much bigger fighter. He's a much more dangerous fighter in that weight class. He's not as chinny, he's not as vulnerable to get knocked out. But one thing that I find interesting about this matchup is Anderson Silva's elusiveness and his movement, because when we see guys like Israel Adesanya and Sandhagen go up against Alex Pereira, you see guys with like agility and athleticism who aren't going to stand in front of him. Like, you see that he does struggle And my favorite fight of Alex Pereira's career is his first fight against Israel Adesanya. I feel like we got to see a lot more of him. We saw him dig deep. We saw more tools. We saw a better Alex Pereira because he had to fight at that level against such a high level fighter. And I feel like he would have to bring out that same level of skill against Anderson Silva. He wouldn't be able to get him out of there like in the first 2 rounds. He would actually have to like dig deep, hunt him down, break him down, and eventually potentially find a KO. But at the same time, Anderson Silva would still be doing his thing, still tagging him up, still setting him up, and potentially countering him and knocking him out. So I feel like it will be a dangerous fight for both, and one mistake could lead to a devastating knockout. But moving on to another dream fight, and that is Sandhagen versus Sean O'Malley. Is a fight that should have happened by now, but it's looking like it might not happen because of the trajectory of both of their careers, where they're at. And yeah, I don't know if this fight is going to happen, but I have it above these other fights because I feel like this is a very competitive fight where I'm not quite sure who would win, and both fighters would really have to elevate their game because usually they were used to having some sort of advantage over their opponent in terms of height and reach, but now it'd be like kind of like fighting the same frame as you, and when you're taller you have so much advantages in terms of like hitting your opponent and not getting hit. But now that's gonna be different, and you have to like change up your defense, you have to change up your tactics. So I feel like it would be a fight that elevates both fighters, and we really get to find out which one is truly better when there aren't those physical advantages over their opponents. But I feel like Sean O'Malley could potentially win this fight. I feel like his power advantage will probably separate the two, and I do feel like he's a little bit faster than Sandhagen, but I do feel like it would be a very interesting matchup to see how they deal with somebody who's got the same size as them. But moving on to number 6, and that is I feel like this would have been the perfect BMF fight. Both guys fight with a lot of action, volume, and I feel like there would be a lot of violence in this fight. I feel like Tony Ferguson in his prime, when he was fighting guys like Anthony Pettis and like RDA and Barboza, like the way he was just putting the pressure on them and staying in their face and outworking them was incredible to watch. And like he looked almost invincible in some of these fights, but Max Holloway is an avalanche, and once he gets going, he doesn't stop. He's got such great footwork, combinations, timing, precision, and at lightweight, he is a little bit more powerful and a little bit more durable, whereas Tony Ferguson in his prime was extremely durable. He was very powerful as well. And I think this has the makings of a Hall of Fame UFC fight. This has the making of a fight of the year contender. I don't think we would see a finish in this fight though. I feel like it would be a decision. But to be honest, like I'm not quite sure who would win this type of fight, because Tony Ferguson, he did have an excellent jab. He did have a long reach. Like Max Holloway did have those like shorter arms, and I feel like Tony Ferguson would be able to disrupt Max Holloway's rhythm and stop him from getting going and potentially hurt him at some points. But at the same time, I feel like Max Holloway could counter some of Tony Ferguson's mistakes in terms of the fundamentals, like maybe like get like overextending or leaving himself open. But at the same time, could he be setting up like a spinning elbow or something like that? Like, it's just such a fascinating fight, and I don't know who would end up winning this one, to be honest. But moving on to number 5, I have Ilia Topuria versus Islam Makhachev were apparently supposed to fight at the UFC White House, but apparently either Ilia asked for too much money or Islam wasn't ready. Who knows what the truth is, but this was one of the most anticipated fights in the UFC, like over the past like year and a half, I would say. Like, it was so anticipated because Ilia was a 2-division champion, undefeated. Islam Makhachev was also a 2-division champion with only 1 loss on his record. They were pound for pound 1 and 2. And they were so talented. They were the way they were finishing their opponents, like before Islam like fought JDM, and also like Ilya just knocking out Max Holloway, Volkanovski, and Oliveira, all three of them. It was just such an exciting fight, and I feel like it still is, to be honest, even though Topuria lost and Makhachev might be slowing down a little bit and not as dominant in his new weight class, but I feel like it's still exciting because Ilya Topuria is the type of guy that would fight his fight. He wouldn't go out there and only be worried about defending the grappling of Islam, which is the problem I think Ian Gary had. Ian Gary was all about, oh, I'm going to defend the grappling. I'm going to show everybody that he can't take me down. He can't hold me down. But that's not how you beat a guy like Islam. You beat him by going right after him and fighting your fight. It doesn't matter if he's going to try to take you down. Go after him. And I feel like Ilya Topuria would absolutely do that. And also, he has a bit of a blueprint to beating Islam. We have seen how Volkanovski, a shorter man like Ilya, was able to defend the grappling. And we've seen Dustin Poirier have success. But Topuria, he would have that knockout power that could potentially put Islam Makhachev to sleep. And Ilya does have the grappling pedigree that could help him even more. But at the same time, Islam Makhachev is good on the feet. He's got excellent kicks. He can keep Ilya Topuria at range, but also he's got some nice counter punches of his own. So maybe he could catch Ilya Topuria like overreaching with a clean counter left hand or counter right hook. He's also got the tie clinch and that nasty head kick that he nearly knocked Islam or Ian Gary out with. There's just so many fascinating elements to this fight that make it really close and competitive, and I don't think it's going to happen, but it would have been such an interesting fight to see. But moving on to number 3, I have now this one might be a bit surprising, but Deiveson Figueiredo, when he was in his prime,
He was a marauder. He had an iron chin.
He did.
And he was not scared to take shots. He would just wade into the fire. I mean, he was very skillful.
Yes.
But he was also willing to put himself in danger.
he was powerful, he was dangerous, he was very skilled and slick as well. And Manel Kape is kind of like that too. He's very dangerous, he's very powerful, and he is very slick, and he hasn't had a boring fight. Like, I think the only time I saw a boring Manel Kape fight was when he fought Muhammad Makhachev. Like, it was weird. Like, these guys hated each other before, but then they did nothing in the fight. But I feel like this would be an exciting fight and explosive fight. And usually flyweight fights are very exciting, and to be honest, like, they have some of the best fights. They don't get the same recognition because they're smaller fighters, but they do put on exciting performances. They are the most skilled fighters, and I feel like two skilled fighters like Deiveson Figueiredo and Manel Kape clashing and fighting each other going forward toe to toe would really be a dream fight. I feel like this would be incredibly fun to watch, but again, I don't know who is going to win this fight, so that's why I am putting it so high up. Like, it's really a back and forth fight, and I feel like this would easily be a fight of the year contender if they both fought in their primes. But moving on to number 3, I have Alexander Volkanovski and Pereira have trained together in the past, and I remember in 2020 when they both fought on the same card. I think it was UFC 251, Usman versus Masvidal 1. Volkanovski defended the title against Max Holloway in the rematch, and Pereira took on Jose Aldo for the bantamweight title. That's when he first got his belt. And I remember after that UFC pay-per-view, I was like, man, I really want to see these two go at it. I feel like it would be a very interesting matchup. And as the years have gone on, as they've continued to progress, I feel like this would just be the most skilled fight ever, to be honest. Both guys have some of the highest fight IQs, and they have some of the best in-fight adjustments. Even at UFC 251, where Volkanovski was losing 2 rounds to match Holloway, the adjustments he was able to make sure he didn't get dropped, and to continue to outstrike Holloway, because Holloway had made some adjustments to beat him based on the first fight. So Volk had to make some adjustments mid-fight, and it still appeared on against Aldo. Like, it was getting tough out there. He was getting his liver smashed in, but he was able to make those adjustments or those beautiful catch counters to Aldo, and eventually he was able to break him. And yeah, as time has gone on, I feel like this fight is truly one fight I would absolutely love to see. And I feel like it could actually potentially still happen. Like, Pereira is the bantamweight champion. Volkanovski is still the featherweight champion. And I feel like if Volk is able to go out there and beat Malzar and beat a couple more contenders, and if Pereira is able to beat Merab again, if he's able to beat a guy like O'Malley and maybe an Umar, and then he moves up to fight Volk, I feel like that could be a reality, and it would truly be an amazing fight with 2 of the smartest UFC fighters of all time, in my opinion. But moving on to number 2, I have
Listen, for me as a fan, you know, I'd love to see fight John in Africa. I'd love to see fight Tyson Fury whenever that happens. I'd love, now that MMA is legalized in France, I'd love to see UFC in France.
Who the hell is John Africa?
No, fighting John in
John
Africa.
Jones in Africa.
Yeah, John Jones in Africa, yeah.
After Francis Ngannou knocked out Stipe Miocic, I was pretty sure that we were going to see John Jones versus Francis Ngannou in the heavyweight division. The UFC said they were going to make it happen. Ngannou wanted it. Apparently, John Jones kind of wanted it. Now he's saying that he wanted it, but I remember seeing him not want that fight. But yeah, it's not gonna happen. It's very unfortunate. Even now, they're still talking about it, but it's not gonna happen. It sucks, but I truly feel like Francis Ngannou could have been the one to beat John Jones. I feel like at heavyweight, I feel like that would have been a very difficult matchup for John Jones. Like, we've seen this improved version of Francis Ngannou, who is taking his time, who's not overextending, who's not rushing and putting himself in vulnerable positions to potentially get taken down to the ground or to potentially gas out in a fight. So we would have seen a much smarter Francis Ngannou take on John Jones, and Ngannou would have a significant power advantage. We've seen him flatten countless heavyweights over the course of his career. He even dropped Tyson Fury in a boxing match. The guy is incredibly powerful and dangerous, and also his wrestling was getting better, and it still is getting better now. So it would have just been such an interesting matchup. Like, would John Jones, the greatest fighter of all time, actually have been able to overcome such a challenging opponent and such a dangerous opponent? And in my opinion, I don't know if John Jones would have won that fight. I truly do not know. But I feel like just the idea of it is what makes it so compelling, and is why I have it as my second highest dream fight. But let's move on to number 1. And I'm sure you know what it is, but here it is. Islam Makhachev and George St. Pierre are 2 of the most well-rounded UFC fighters ever. They are so complete. They are so smart and technical when they're in there, and they are both in the same weight class at 170 pounds. They both have around the same height. I think George St. Pierre has a slightly longer reach, so it's very evenly matched, and I feel like we would see the best of mixed martial arts when these 2 would enter the cage. I truly believe that, and that is why I'm placing it as my number 1 dream fight. I feel like in terms of MMA, we would just see the best representation of all the arts and all the styles. I would probably say that Islam Makhachev would win because he's a newer generation fighter, but George St. Pierre was a fighter that was ahead of his time, and if he was competing today, I'm pretty sure he would beat a lot of fighters in his weight class at 170 pounds, and he could potentially beat Islam Makhachev. But prime for prime, it will be very, very interesting to see how this would have played out. But that does it for my top 10 dream fights in the UFC. Let me know down below some of your dream fights, and do you have any dream fights that are on my list? But yeah, let me know down below. And with all that being said, thank you guys for watching. God bless. Make sure you guys like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.